PMFers, who's got that product market fit? Boop, boop, boop. I'm here with Kevin Owocki. Yeah. Ooh, no,
Am I
it's more
doing
like
it?
this. No, it's more like this. No, it's more like this. Yeah,
Oh, like
yeah. There it is.
a
Yeah. Oh,
power.
yeah. Yeah. And you have a lot of real estate, here. Like you can do lots of things, right? If it's forward, forward rolls aren't as good. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, Owocki, how you doing, man? Good to see you.
I'm great. Glad to be here.
Heck yeah. All right. PMFers. This is like episode 8 or so. Maybe even 9, maybe even 7. I think it's 8. I want to know long before crypto. Let's just go back to you learning how to build and you building anything before crypto, but what like got you started building?
Yeah, so I started building PHP websites in like the
Yeah.
late 90s, early 2000s back in the day. PHP bulletin board, PHP e-commerce, and I was just kind of like I had a job as a busboy at Outback Steakhouse, and then I was also like a cashier at a grocery store, and I hated it so much. I was watching the clock go by, and it was just so boring, and my boss was up my ass about everything, and I just really wanted to make money online so I don't have to do that anymore. And so I started just hacking around with ways to make money online in the 90s. And in the 90s no one was really doing stuff on the internet, so if you're like an up and coming kid who can program, you kind of have a blue ocean to experiment in. So experimenting with making money online in the 1999 was the OG.
Dope. That is awesome. Okay. And then first thing you built on chain that people used, or let's say like dabbling or even starting with on chain product market fit. What can we highlight there?
Yeah, so in 2017 I started really messing around with smart contracts, and I was sort of on this arc where I'd been working in startups for 10 years or so. And I had a startup that like imploded in 2012, and I'd just been working for my friends' startups from like 2012 to 2017. But it was the same kind of thing where I was just kind of hacking nights and weekends and looking for a way that I could build my own venture and not have to work for someone else. And I started messing around with a bunch of different ideas, and it was very casual. It was like one idea a month I would ship. I had like VR games I was shipping. I had a on-chain cryptocurrency trader that was driven by AI that I was messing around with. Actually, no, wait, sorry, that was using a centralized exchange, not a DEX. The first actual on-chain thing I think I built was the original Gitcoin prototype, which was the ability to like tip people in ETH and then also put bounties out there. And that was like the MVP of Gitcoin in summer of 2017. And so I like self-taught myself Solidity with a book that I bought on Amazon. And I built this ridiculously inefficient in retrospect contract where you could put bounties on chain. Bounties are just kind of, if you do X, I'll give you Y. And the metadata of the bounty was represented in JSON. And I always remember that the first Gitcoin bounties contract, I just put the JSON straight on chain.
Yeah.
not even an
It's there
IPFS hash.
forever.
And it was back then gas was cheap, so it didn't even really matter all that much. But yeah, that was the first thing I built on chain in 2017. And then when Gitcoin joined consensus in late 2017, that's when I started to actually have users like, Joe Lubin and acquired Gitcoin in like November of 2017. And then he introduced me to like the Ethereum Foundation and to MetaMask and to Truffle. And I went from just like me and my friends using it to like top tier projects in Ethereum using Gitcoin. And I'll never forget that like when someone from Truffle, back in the day, Truffle was like a big deal. When they posted a bounty to Gitcoin, it got like scooped up within like 6 hours. And I remember Tim, the Truffle founder, DMing me and being like, "Hey, did you like specially like hook up this bounty for me?" And I was like, "Nah, dude, like people just come to us because they want to work on
Amazing.
Ethereum and they know there's bounties there." And that was really special. I felt like we'd hit like a tinge of PMF then when people started using the original Gitcoin.
Can we zoom in on those first users? I think they're so important for folks that are building their own smart contracts and protocols. You said that it was kind of like just your friends at first using it, and then Joe kind of shined a light on it. What, like your friends using it as in 10 friends, 100 friends? Like what are those
Yeah.
first users look like? How'd you even get the first 10?
Well, I'm flattered that you think I have 100 friends, Austin. I so uh I just kind of like told people about Gitcoin when I first started it, and I had sort of soft launched it to my friends to to see what they thought of it. And there's this thing. I like I said, I've been doing web startups for about 20 years now, and at the point when I was starting Gitcoin, it was about 10 years. And there's this thing called a double-sided marketplace, where basically, like on Gitcoin, the original Gitcoin, it was a double-sided marketplace between people who wanted to do work in open source software and people who had work in open source software that they wanted to do. And so what I was trying to do was I was trying to build the demand side and the supply side, sort of like there's an impedance matching between them. It's like, like if you post a bounty and it doesn't get scooped up, then you're not going to come back and post another bounty. And likewise, if you're a bounty hunter and there's no inventory, you're probably not going to come back. And so it was just about like growing both sides of the market at the same time. And what was really key for me about getting distribution through the deal with Joe Lubin and Consensus was that all of a sudden I had like Truffle and MetaMask and like all these top tier projects posting bounties on Gitcoin. And then that really helped me bootstrap like the workers on the network, because I had top tier projects that they could work for. And then it sort of like flywheeled from there. So double-sided marketplaces are just this special category of web startups where you have to grow both sides of the market. And ideally you want to start with like the A-list side of the market and the side of the market that is the most constrained. And that's just like what the deal with Consensus gave me back in the day. So, yeah, to answer your question, once I had that like top tier projects using the platform, then it kind of just grew from there.
This double-sided market thing is something that I feel like I failed a lot at in the early things that I built on Ethereum. It was always like, this would be cool to build and I would use it. I'm going to build it. And I wasn't thinking at all about like both sides of the market. Who are both sides and who are you helping to coordinate? And if there aren't two sides of a thing and you're helping them coordinate, you probably don't need Ethereum. and also they can't trust each other. There's another weird thing there. But I guess bounties kind of, yeah. So yeah. I think Zach Herring introduced me to that, but you probably introduced him to that. But I think that this idea of you should be able to clearly define both sides of your market and figure out like who are the easy ones to get and who are the hard ones to get. And I think a cool insight from you is you only have to get a celebrity on one side of this. And if you get a celebrity on one side, then it's going to be a lot easier to get a bunch of people over here. And maybe you'll get a celebrity over here. And then you can use that over here to bring other people in. That's really cool.
Well, this leads me to network effects, which I think are like the most powerful thing for you to be aware of as a developer building something in Ethereum or otherwise. So network effects are this idea that a network grows exponentially in value as it adds more users to it linearly. So think about like a very simple example is like Facebook. Facebook is useless to you if it's just you and if it's just you on it. But like if you join Facebook, then I have someone I can connect with on Facebook. If my entire high school class and my entire college class is there, then the value grows exponentially n squared per the number of users on there that I can relate to. And so a really magical thing in startups is when you have linear inputs, you're just adding users, but you have exponential value being created from that. That's like the lift off that you're aiming for when you're building a double-sided marketplace. And so with Gitcoin, once I had people posting work to the platform, then that allowed me to attract more hackers, which made it more valuable for the people who were posting work, which then it attracted more people who were going to post work. And it sort of grew n squared. This is kind of like Metcalfe's law, but applied to web startups. And so if you're out there trying to build PMF and you have a double-sided marketplace, I would just encourage you to think about how it gets better the more people use the network. And that's how you build something exponentially valuable.
Nuggets of wisdom from Owocki. This is great. You totally understand the assignment here. I love it. So, okay. So you've got your first users. What does your stack look like at that point? Do you start hiring a developer? Do you start like you're not still writing PHP anymore at this point? Who do you?
What if I was? What if you invited me on this podcast to distribute thought lead to all your followers, and I was writing it in PHP 4?
PHP. How could we? Do it? Yeah.
Let's not go down that rabbit hole just to save us the brand damage. So I'm a big Python guy, and I built it in Python Django, the original Gitcoin.
That's right, Django. I forgot about that.
And my friend Piper Merriam is like one of the leaders of Web3 Pi and what's called Snake Charmers, which is like the Ethereum Foundation Python people. And he's the one who kind of got me into Ethereum in the first place. And so he was actually my ideal customer. I was like, yo, Piper, I will get you developers. And so we built Gitcoin with Web3 Pi, and and I was actually giving him developers at the time, and I actually sourced the first couple hires for Gitcoin using Gitcoin. So I used Gitcoin to build Gitcoin, and then I brought them in full time. Once I had the deal with Consensus, and I actually had budget to hire people, and so I'm a big fan of dog fooding your product as much as you can. And it was just cool that like the first batch of hires that I had on Gitcoin were actually users of Gitcoin that I met on Gitcoin, which I think is like a much more relatable experience that cares about the product more so than like hiring through a recruiter or hiring through another channel. And I think that none of those actually, there's one of them that's still 7 years later that's still working on Gitcoin. So it's been kind of a funny change from there. But yeah, to answer your question, it was all originally Python back in the day.
Dope. Awesome. So let's get into ideas. Like you said you were doing kind of one a month back in the day when you were throwing things at the wall. Like what is your like process of thinking up new ideas? Or is it like shower thoughts? Is it like you have a problem and you work backwards? Like if you going back to like Greenfield right now had everything, how would you go about like thinking about what kinds of things to put on chain?
Yeah. I think that when I look back at my experience launching ventures, I think that I have a pattern of going broad and then going deep and then going broad and then going deep. It's almost like a systematic exploration of a design space for me. And just to play that forward with a little bit more fidelity, what I would my method of exploring the design space was like, okay, it's 2016. I know I want to do something that's my own startup and I don't want to work for someone else. I launched 5 side projects, and one of them is Gitcoin. And I really realized that there's heat there. And so I abandoned the other 4 projects and I really pinch and zoom on Gitcoin. And then Gitcoin, we start off with bounties, but then we eventually launch virtual hackathons and like an NFT and an ethical ad network and Gitcoin grants. And then, like the market drops 95%. And I'm like, oh, fuck, I can only do like one of these. And so, we spin out all the other things and then we just focus on Gitcoin grants. And then even within Gitcoin grants, we're kind of exploring, do we want to build this with originally Gitcoin grants was a subscription grant platform and no one gave a shit about subscriptions. We pivoted to quadratic funding. So again, we go broad and then we pinch and zoom on quadratic funding. And so I think that like the process for me has just been sort of like yeeting out ideas into the market like very quickly and very agilely, seeing what has heat in the market and then doubling down on the thing that has heat and abandoning everything else. This is like, if you're a software developer who has a bias towards speed and you can bring it to market yourself, this is something that you can do. I've since met product managers who are like, Kevin, you could just like study the design space a priori and do user interviews instead of just building stuff in a vacuum. And I think that there's like a little bit of like talking to your customers and studying the market that you can do to inform this and do it more effectively. But the sort of breadth first, then depth first, then breadth first, then depth first exploration of the design spaces is I think the arc that I've weaved over the last couple of years.
Dope. Let's talk about that heat. When you say that an idea has heat, I think it's like mostly like users and you see people talking about it, but can you kind of like, I don't know, just illuminate that heat a little bit? How do you know when you know? Like, how do you know an idea has legs?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like the name of the podcast is PMFers, right? Which, by the way, I think is a fun meme. As someone who has an MFers NFT, but that stands for product market fit, right? So like the definition of product market fit is when a product has strong market demand, which means people want it, they use it, and they're willing to pay for it. So I think that I've had such sad experiences where I pour my heart and soul into something for a couple months and then I launch it and it just lands like a thud. And it hurts a little bit when that
Yes,
happens.
it
But
does.
this is like the inverse of this. Like you ever like build something and like you just get like you can just tell that there's strong organic demand and that it's striking a chord. And I think it's PMF. It's something that when you see it, and that's how you know that it's worth doubling down and investing more resources.
This happened to me recently. We're going on tour. We're going to a bunch of universities to do Ethereum workshops and help people get their stack and everything ready. And we have a prototype website. We just like put the prototype up and then like someone found it and retweeted it. And then like 2 days later, the Ethereum Foundation's retweeting it. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, I guess we're doing this now. Like the prototype is out there. Like we never launched it. I never said anything about it, but someone else found it. And then like an organic thing started. And you could tell that there was just like, I don't know, just like raw energy there somewhere. Someone saw it and said, this needs to happen. And that kind of like oh, okay, like, yeah, I get it. Like, you kind of see that traction a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I think that another sort of principle here is that inbound demand is way better than demand that you have to generate through outbound
Mhm.
actions. So, I've been in Web2 startups back in the day where we built like, I don't know, I would consider it a subpar product in retrospect, and we had to pay all these advertising dollars to get people to pay attention to it. And the thing that I've learned in the 10 years since that is that when you have a product that people really want, you don't need to market it as much. It creates inbound demand, it creates word of mouth, and it's made me stop wasting time on forcing things on the market that are not something the market demands. And one of the great things about like Twitter and just being highly networked these days is that you can get feedback pretty quick. A lot, like I think I'm like sort of prolific for my Twitter and just like how much I tweet. And the reason that I'm doing that is I'm like testing out new ideas. Before I write a whole fucking book about something, I tweet out the idea and see if it slaps or not. Before I write a new software product, I'll tweet out the idea and just see if it has any organic demand. And so just that validating of something before you spend a lot of resources on it, I think is something that you can do in 2025 way easier than you could 10 or 15 years ago.
So there's this weird thing where, like, kind of what we're saying here is like, if you build it, they will come. And I still don't think that's completely true. I think that the really good ideas on the surface, if they're on the surface and people can like grok them quickly, maybe that's true. But also, I feel like there's a lot of builders who just have this idea that like I'm just going to put this thing out here and it's going to go nuts, and then they put it out there and it doesn't go nuts. That doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad idea, right? There is some forcing, I think, that you have to do sometimes with ideas. Don't you think?
I think that yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that you said so far, but like the thing I would challenge is your orientation to what we're talking about here. Why are we talking about solutions and app ideas absent of what their audience is? Let's work backwards from an audience and figure out what their problems are and what their needs are and their capacities are. And it's product market fit, right? So I think that like as a builder, as someone with a computer science degree, I have a bias towards solutionism. And what we really need to do is get out of our little bubbles, and we need to go talk to customers, go talk to the audience and study what they need. And that's how you find PMF. That's how you find product market fit. So my challenge to your framing is just like, is an idea good or bad? I don't know. Like reframe the question. Is a good idea good or bad for this specific audience and market segment? It has to be anchored in relative to who it's going to serve. And then you can start to really answer the question of, is this a good idea or a bad idea relative to the audience?
Okay, that's good framing.
It's
I
and
still,
it's really hard
yeah. Go ahead.
because as a software engineer, like a lot of us are introverts and we don't like talking to people, and what we know is writing software. And so I think that like if you're a builder out there and you're building something, you either need to figure out how to talk to your target customers, or you need to find a co-founder who's like your extrovert counterpart that's going to be able to like really qualify the demand and seek out that audience. And man, there's nothing more powerful than like a strong shipper builder and a strong sales marketing product person. Like that's the ultimate co-founder duo, I think.
Yeah, I think I've seen that a lot before, and I've seen that be successful for sure.
One of the things I think that made Gitcoin in retrospect kind of like a breakout hit in the 2018 cycle was that I was building it for myself. So like I wasn't building like something like if I had been building like a real estate blockchain project, I would have to go out and talk to like real estate developers and figure out what they want and like how to work with them. And I was building for open source software developers, and I myself was an open source software developer. And so I was building for myself, and just like the tight feedback loop you get between your product and in your market that you get when you're building and you're dog fooding something yourself is that you can just spin that iterative loop of building a product way faster because you're building it for yourself. I mean, there were times where I would get customer feedback and I would within a day or two just like ship an update and like
No.
really wow them with the speed of my execution. And you can only do that when you're like really tightly connected to your market, or you yourself are the market. And so I just think I fell ass backwards into a group of people who weren't afraid of MetaMask and like on-chain transactions in 2018. Like it's literally open source software developers working on Ethereum. They're going to know how to install a wallet, and they're not going to be afraid of self-custodying a key or sending a transaction or anything like that. And so, in hindsight, I think that it was kind of like dumb luck that I just fell ass backwards into that market segment. And And like I think that today we're starting to solve some of those onboarding problems with installing a wallet on your machine and making a experience that feels more like mobile first or user friendly first. And man, if you're building for developers, you don't have to worry about that as much because they're technically competent enough to get around those UX challenges.
But these days, I don't think we're building for developers as much. Or maybe you have some, niche product that is for developers. But I think the focus now is let's get some mainstream apps on L2s
Yeah.
and get some mainstream users.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had an idea. It didn't take off automatically. You spent some time forcing it into the ecosystem, and it still doesn't take off. Like, is there any wisdom around how to let an idea go, or how to know that you've put in time? Maybe it's just like a time limit. You just say, you know what, we're at the end of the month. I've built, shipped, pushed, still nothing. I'm going to move on. Like, is there any wisdom there?
I mean, I think you have to listen to what the market is telling you, and you have a choice, which is you can go into cockroach mode and like really try to assert your vision in the world if you're not getting the feedback. But to me, that seems like an exercise in futility. And so if the market is telling you that there isn't demand, I think that you have to find a way to emotionally release it. And different things work for different people, and I'm still learning to let go of some of the ideas that I've had that maybe the timing wasn't right or my execution wasn't right. But I think that a good relationship to an idea is to be able to entertain it and to be able to explore it, but not to get attached to it. And that's easier said than done. For me, the way I solve that is just by having a lot of different ideas and things I'm exploring at once, and it makes it way easier to ditch one when it doesn't work, to have like other ones that I can pivot to.
Sounds like ideas are like girlfriends here. You have to emotionally release them. And if you don't
Yeah.
have an emotional attachment to your ideas, like they're not going to succeed in the beginning, right?
Yeah. This is all the podcast needs is two old married guys talking about how it's like
Yes.
this
Yes.
stuff is like dating. No, I mean,
Yep.
I think that like, yeah, there's, you have to be able to let go of your ideas that don't work. And Chris Dixon actually has this really amazing post about the idea maze, which is basically a metaphor for you're a builder and you're trying to figure out what you want to build. And it's almost like you're traversing a maze and trying to see around corners in order to figure out how to get to the finish line. And I think that like it's one of the hardest things I think about being a builder and having like really liking, object oriented programming and binary data types, and like is the discreteness of the computer, and that's what you're used to being able to manipulate. But like the real world is chaotic, and markets, you can't always really like inspect the state of things that you're interacting with. And I think that like the idea maze for me is like a good metaphor of navigating that chaotic environment and trying to like see above the playing board and where you're going. And you have to develop that critical thinking and the ability to make risk adjusted bets and traverse the idea maze. And yeah, I would just recommend Chris Dixon's post idea maze for anyone who's trying to figure out PMF.
Let's double down on that a little bit. Like you have so much founder knowledge, and I think a lot of like these little bits of like wisdom that kind of make so much sense after you say them. What are some good founder resources that have changed your life or have inspired you? Chris Dixon is a good example, but what else?
Yeah, so Chris Dixon's post, specifically the idea maze, is just about like the pre-product market fit phase of a startup, and that's something I would recommend. Another thing that I found really useful for me is startup accelerator programs. So I went through Techstars in 2008, and that's my first venture, my first like real Web2 venture. Learned a lot about running teams and shipping software and exploring market spaces. And I think that getting access to mentorship and other people who are trying to solve these problems and saturating alongside them as you're exploring these design spaces is really important, because you get the ability to sort of work through problems with people, but also just way less lonely than it would be if you're trying to do it yourself. And just making friends and networking yourself with other builders that and supporting each other, I think is one of the most relieving things I think you can do, because startups are hard. Like I think that a lot of people who come into this space, just like all you read about is like, X startup raises Y million
Goes to the
dollars
moon.
and
Yeah.
like goes to the moon. And like there's a real survivorship bias in those stories. I don't think people realize how hard it is to do startups and to do ventures until you actually do it. And so, if you're gonna take the leap and do it, then I think doing it together and doing it in a network and finding people who are gonna support you is really important. So Techstar is like, they gave me my start, and I'm always very thankful to them for that. And there's similar structures in Web3 and for Ethereum, and I hope that there'll be more soon. But accelerators can be a really good fit. And then, I think another thing you can do is just have aligned expectations with what's realistic. Like you're not going to create the next Snapchat or Uniswap or like whatever on the first try. Like I spent 15 years getting kicked in the nuts by Web2 VCs and users before I started Gitcoin. Like failure is the recipe for learning, which is the recipe for success in future ventures. So just don't have an expectation that you're going to hit it out of the park at your first at bat.
One time we YOLO'd a smart contract to mainnet and hit kind of a big home run just randomly. I don't know if it was a big home run. Like
Should we talk about that?
didn't get any money. Yeah, let's talk. I just remember you and I on a call writing Solidity code for a bonding curve, and then literally an hour later, all these people YOLOing into it and buying Moonshot Bots. Is that what it was? Yeah.
So this is during so I think that this is 2021. This is after 4 years of trying stuff and failing and getting to know the market. And I think that, there's a lot of sort of skill and ambition and being able to read the waves that I think you and I had at this point, both being in Ethereum for 4 years. And maybe it was sort of that well-placed bet that allowed us to ride the wave. But this is during the NFT craze of 2021. And I think I had like a board meeting or something with like Joe Lubin where he was like, you should do something with NFTs, Kevin. And I was like, yeah, you're probably right. Like, and then so I DM'd you and I was like, hey man, I want to launch an NFT project. And so we named it Moonshot Bots and yeeted it out there and put it on a bonding curve. I think the initial price was like $50, but every time you purchased one, it would push up the value of the next Moonshot Bot, and the price curve went from like $50 a Moonshot Bot up to like, I want to say like it was like an ETH $4,000 per Moonshot Bot. And we ended up raising, this is another key thing, is like we didn't pocket the money just went straight to the matching pool. And I think that that's like an important thing that made us stand out relative to other PFP NFT projects, was that we didn't actually pocket the money. It was all for public goods, and that is what created legitimacy around it. But I wore my Moonshot Bot as my PFP for a year or two after that, and I still put it on from time to time. And that was a real moment that that happened there. Oh, and the other thing I want to share here is that I built this avatar builder into the original Gitcoin 1.0 website, where you could go in and you could like customize your avatar in all these different ways, like give it different eyes, give it different ears, give it different shirt color, different background. And I remember like pouring my heart and soul into that feature because I wanted, at the time, the user hypothesis was that we were going to be able to allow people to express themselves online using these avatars. This is before ChatGPT, where you could just like Giblify yourself and make an avatar. But like, and it actually really worked. Like people would take their Gitcoin avatars and turn them into like their Twitter avatars. And we had, 50,000 avatars generated across 30 different avatar styles. And I remember that the skin that I used for Moonshot Bots had like 15 people using it. And it was like really undiscovered. No one really gave a shit about it when it was on Gitcoin. But then as soon as we added a token to it, people were like aping it and paying hundreds of dollars for the avatar. And I just thought it was kind of funny that no one cared before it was tokenized, and after it was tokenized, people were willing to pay hundreds of dollars for it. So that was a fun experiment. I'd be curious to turn the mic around to ask you what you remember from that experiment and why you think it was successful.
Well, one thing it taught me is that when you build a bonding curve, you need to add slippage, and we didn't. And when people were trying to buy at the same time, they were getting failed transactions.
We had so much demand that people would try to buy in the same block, and then person A would get the bot, and then it would push up the value for person B, and then their transaction would fail because it wouldn't have enough ETH. So yeah, that was an issue.
Now
Yeah,
that is a concept I teach all new devs as they're coming through. I make sure they understand what slippage is and why you need it, because a lot of these products, like when you're building something at home on local hosts, they don't have these problems. But when thousands of people are trying to use them, then all these problems arise and you have to build for those problems. So I remember that being like an eye-opening moment for me, that there's still so much to learn and I'm an idiot and we still put it on mainnet and it still worked, but there are things to learn always.
what do you think there is to learn about us writing the I think I had the call with Joe on Thursday and I DM'd you on Friday and I was like, I want to build an NFT this weekend. And like you and I pinged it back and forth. I should actually look at the commit history and see the exact time frame of it. But like, do you think we were irresponsible to like conceive of the project on Friday and then launch it on Monday? My answer to that is that it was a calculated risk. And like the thing that I learned from Moloch DAO, I remember when Moloch DAO launched in 2019, is that if your state machine in the contract is small enough and you don't store any money in the contract, then it's actually pretty easy to go from conception to building it to launching it live without like a full 7-week $100,000 audit. And I remember being like, this is a calculated risk and we thought through all the different attack vectors, but it's a small enough contract with not enough risk that like we can build it in 4 days and ship it. But I don't know, do you have a differing view on that?
No, I think I agree with you. I am always on the side of kind of like YOLOing things, probably a little bit too much. But on this podcast, there's been, a heated debate about whether audits are worth it or not. And there are people on this podcast that have released apps that got hacked, but for less money than their entire audit was going to be. Things like that, where sometimes putting it into the ecosystem and letting it get lendy is the best audit. But coming from an idiot who has never put millions of dollars in a contract and had it disappear before, like that's, take it for what it's worth. But I think that even now with AI, and we'll get to that in a second, like you can YOLO even faster, right? Like it's not 3 days now, it's 3 hours if you really want to. I put an app on mainnet in 30 minutes yesterday and recorded it. And so it's there and you could put it out there, but yeah.
Yeah, I think the most recent time I did that is I vibe coded a capital allocation contract for something that we were working on. I put it on Optimism and I remember looking through it and searching for vulnerabilities. But the other thing that I did was I just put only like 0.1 ETH into it, which is, like $150. And I was like, if this gets exploited, like that's cheaper than paying someone to buy an audit. And so it's always an ROI calculation. And I think that we have to remember that if you're building a venture scale startup and you're going to put millions of dollars into a contract, then you have a different auditing risk profile than someone who's just eating out a small consumer app that's only meant to be a throwaway. And you have to contextualize it with what's the risk and what's the reward as you're building it. And the thing that this brings me to is that I think speed is so important. To be able to take an idea and to be able to bring it from concept to reality in a couple hours, and to be able to, tweet it out to your audience and to get the market feedback fast. That's so important, because I've been on projects, and this actually became a problem when Gitcoin became a DAO. It became so slow and bureaucratic that it would take us like quarters to ship new things. And I think that we fell behind in market. And so there's a risk reward, not only of exploiting being an attack vector for your project, but moving too slow and becoming too bureaucratic and lumbering where people just give up on your project, I think is like the counter side of that trade and that trade-off. And one of the things I've always liked about, back in when you and I were working together on various projects, is just the speed of execution. It felt like we were hot knife through butter sometimes. And I think that allows you to recruit developers, that allows you to recruit users, because people see the velocity that you're working at. And so that's the consideration that you have to have when you're figuring out how fast you want to move and what risks you want to take.
Hell yeah. You kind of talked about an Ethereum accelerator or a startup accelerator, Techstars, kind of for the Web 2 world. But what does that look like in Ethereum? What does an Ethereum accelerator look like? It seems to me like a lot of the acceleration needs to almost happen at the L2 layer. We should see mainstream apps at L2. So maybe L2 should be accelerating, but then how do we accelerate the accelerators?
It's worked so well the last 2 years where we delegated all of our go-to-market to layer 2s. I'm being sarcastic. I actually don't think it's worked all that well. I mean, I've been so it's April 17th right now. I think the last week or so I've been really kind of like shit posting and really complaining that there's not enough support for app builders in Ethereum and there's too much focus on infrastructure, and I've been kind of like purposefully just calling that out and calling my community of Twitter followers to comment on where we can solve those things. And I think that an accelerator is definitely one of the I think it's a really important structure. And what I would like to see is I would like to see basically some sort of structure where you've got I mean basically Techstars. Like I think Techstars gave me my start in entrepreneurship, and I think that I would love to see that paid forward to the next generation of Web3 entrepreneurs. And I think that the structure of Techstars is basically they get hundreds of applications for only 10 slots in the accelerator. And then once you're in the accelerator, everyone in the Techstars network rallies around making you successful for 3 months. And they give you a little bit of seed capital in exchange for 6% of your venture. And then at the end of the 3 months, you get to pitch investors your startup, and hopefully you raise a big, monster round of funding. And so I think a structure like that is a total no-brainer to do in the Ethereum ecosystem. And I think that like what I'm really looking for out of fixing some of the layers that we have, fixing some of the problems we have at the app layer of Ethereum, is that I think we've got to move away from these like dinky little like bounties and like hackathons that people are doing where basically you get like, I don't know, $5,000 for solving some issue. And like basically the app developers, you're only attracting, people who are attracted to like a $5,000 bounty or prize at that point. Like we need to attract world-class entrepreneurs into Ethereum and get them building ventures on chain. And I think in order to do that, you're talking about much bigger check sizes and much more curated experience where you're actually accelerating world-class entrepreneurs or people who have the potential to become world-class entrepreneurs and giving them the skills and network connections that they need to really survive and thrive in the year 2025 in this cycle. And so I would really like to see more of these structures that systematically support the app layer come together over the next couple of years. And I don't think delegating to layer twos is the right structure, unfortunately. I think we tried that over the last couple of years and it hasn't really worked. So we'll see what comes together. But I think that the risk if we don't do this is that Ethereum continues to atrophy and that we've created all this new supply of block space and that we're not going to have demand for it. And so I think it's an existential problem if we're going to be a smart contract platform to create actual demand and real world usage for Ethereum. So I hope to see the Ethereum Foundation and Etherealize and other ventures in the space, Consensus, starting to really create structures that attract world-class entrepreneurs and can build world-class ventures on chain. And maybe Gitcoin and Alo Capital can do something here too. I think we're in the early stages of studying this design space.
Hell yes. So to pattern match Techstars a little bit onto Ethereum, let's say, and first of all, like shout out to people who have been doing accelerators in Ethereum already. I feel like when we ask this, there's like Sozu House and other people that stand up and be like, we get it, but we need more. Like yes, and like we need a lot more of that.
More and better. Like it's great that accelerators already exist, but who's creating the next Uniswap and the next like real venture that actually has demand? And I just think that we haven't gotten there in systematically creating new, really world-class ventures yet.
But to pattern match the idea of Techstars, and yes, there are some accelerators and we need more and more, you would probably hold applications. So maybe the EF puts out something that says there's going to be this Ethereum accelerator of accelerators. We put an application out, just like for the Ethereum Fellowship Protocol and other things, which I think they get good numbers on. Let's say EF says we're looking for product founders, sign up here. We get 100. We pick the 10 best. We bring them in. Now, is it in person or is it virtual? Like, do you like fly somewhere and live somewhere for a while, or what happened next?
I think that there's a trade-off there. I mean, I think it's definitely more of an immersive experience to have people co-located and working in the same space as each other. And you can do remote first, but it just creates a lack of commitment among the founders. I think that summer that I spent at Techstars was world changing because I got to know IRL the people who were there. But then again, this is back in 2008, so we maybe don't want to transpose the 2008 structure on 2025.
And again, we're a bunch of old married guys. What do we know?
Yeah,
but that lack of commitment, even, sorry, I'm on all these tangents, but you cannot have a lack of commitment, right? Like as a founder, there cannot be a shred of lack of commitment. You're going to get hit from all sides with all sorts of shit. That's going to be so hard. You have to just be almost like arrogantly ready to do whatever it takes. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I think that ventures are all consuming, and I think that, you know, what Techstars would say is like, we don't accept side projects. Like, you're becoming an entrepreneur, and we're going to invest all this time and money in you, and we want to know that you're full time on your venture. So, it really, I think it requires people who are going to go all in and aren't doing this like piddling around in a bunch of different side projects kind of thing.
I'm a piddler. I know it. Yes, you have to be a serious person, and you have to go after.
Yeah, okay, and it's okay to pit. Like, I think the word piddle is funny, by the way. Piddle market fit. But like, so Gitcoin was a side project for me initially, and I was piddling. But then when I realized it had heat, I was like, oh, I could quit my job and go work on Gitcoin. And so I think that you know, you just have to, like, you can piddle to start to validate it, and then like really go all in once you realize, oh, there's a venture scale play here.
Heck yeah. Okay, so applications go out. We get 100. We pick the best 10 that are serious people that are willing to do it. They either fly in or it's virtual. It's a few months, and what you get is hella mentors in the space, hella builders, maybe even some L2 money or L2 connections. Just like lots of like friends. One thing that I really learned from this PMFers thing is that like everyone needed friends, and they would bounce ideas off friends. They would bounce products off friends. Even if they're not your friend, just like people around you that are into the same things as you, I call them friends. Like you kind of need those friends. This accelerator would be, we're going to put you around really smart, really capable, really high agent friends, and we're going to kind of let that rub off on you and give you whatever you need to do what you need to do to get serious, to do your thing. And then you said at the end of that, then you introduce them to a bunch of VCs, and you give them the chance to really like raise capital with the thing that they've been working on. So they're kind of like coding in the middle. Is that right? Like you're building the product and trying things in the middle, and then you kind of show it off at the end and try to raise funds for the next round of it. Is that how it works?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like you're trying to demonstrate PMF, and this is, just think of it as like a fulcrum, like in which there's money and resources around you that are laser focused on the pressure of like turning you and your venture from like carbon into a diamond. And so, I mean, it's all about PMF. And just to like articulate this, people actually probably don't know this in Web3 because our capital cycle is so fucked up with ICOs and tokens and everything. Like, but like pre-seed is basically like me and you are piddling in a garage trying to figure out what the fuck we're doing. Seed stage is like, okay, we have a glimpse of like where this thing is going, and we're starting to get a tinge of PMF. And then Series A is like, we've achieved PMF, and now we're like starting to scale. We're moving from like 0 to 1 to 1 to 10. And then Series C, B, C, and D are typically when you've got a, like, your venture is like just add water. You go to a VC and you say, hey, our unit economics are, if you put in $1, I know how to turn that dollar into $1.10 because our product is so like sticky and has good PMF. And then like Series B, C, and D are just like scaling up your venture so that you have, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. And then IPO is like the end of the capital structure in Web 2. Now, this is totally inverted and fucked in Web 3 because you can just launch a token, and then the token becomes the product. And then like, you know, like no one bothers creating PMF because all you have to do is generate enough attention and hype. And like, why would you bother with PMF? And so I actually think like reverting back to that capital structure of like seed to A to B to C is like kind of what a healthy capital structure for these ventures looks like. And that's the only, like, the market has to reward that, by the way, like actually having PMF and revenue, and not just creating like a token that, I don't know, fucking Elon tweets about, like, because the entrepreneurs won't spend time on creating these ventures and pouring their whole life into it if there's like cheaper, easier returns to be had. So but anyway, yeah, the accelerator is like really focused on the seed stage and the A stage, I think.
Okay, and also just expounding on how fucked our market is, like sometimes the prices are up and you think the thing you did was successful because it made money, but it's only making money because you're in the right place at the right time, and
Yeah.
you kind of grow complacent. But that's a side thing. That's a side thing. What I want to get into here is a little bit more digging in this like VC nomenclature. Like when you go to raise funds, you need to be a serious person, but you also need to know like a lot of nomenclature, like 2 on 20. And what does that even mean? Right? Like, can you explain it a little bit? Like some of this
Yeah.
nomenclature?
So what I learned all this from, like, there's a book called Venture Deals by
Great.
Brad Feld, who's an entrepreneur that I discovered
Techstars
through
too, right?
Techstars. Yeah.
Yeah.
And basically the sub tagline is like, be smarter than your venture capitalist and your lawyer. And the fact that this information is out there is awesome, because like 30 years ago when you were starting a venture, this information wasn't in the commons, and the VCs and the lawyers knew much more than you as a founder. And now there's no information asymmetry at all, which is awesome. But anyway, 2 on 20, what that basically means is that I'm raising $2 million on a pre-money of $20 million. So my startup was valued, my hypothetical startup is valued at $20 million, and I'm adding $2 million to it. So the post money will be $22 million, because 20 pre-money plus 2 in investment capital is worth 22 in post money. And then I basically sold about 10% of my company to the venture capitalist if I've done a deal of that type. So that's what 2 on 20 means. The other thing I think it's important to get to know is this thing called unit economics, which is basically there's a thing called cost per acquisition. So basically my hypothetical startup that we just raised 2 on 20 on, say that it takes us $1 to acquire a user, and that's that's like our marketing budget. We just spent $100,000 to acquire 100,000 users, and that's how we got to a CPA of $1. But then our LTV, our lifetime value of each user, is $2. So basically then I can go to the VCs and I'll be like, if you give me $1 million, I can turn it into $2 million if our unit economics scale. And so like if you walk into a Series A or a Series B pitch and you don't have you don't know what your unit economics are, it's just a much harder pitch than knowing what your unit economics are. So like these are kind of some of the things that you'll learn when you start to scale a venture through A and B stage. And I don't think I've actually ever gotten to C or D stage, so I don't know what kind of stuff you're doing at that point. Probably meeting with Goldman Sachs and like IPOing or something like that. But you just learn the ropes by doing it. And you can study it academically, you can study it in like business school, but until you actually do it, you don't have that sort of muscle memory of going through it. And so I think that that's the most important thing to do, is just to keep trying and be persistent. And that's what I'd love to see more Web3 founders do.
What was that book again from Brad Feld?
Venture Deals by Brad Feld.
Venture Deals. Okay.
Yeah.
Definitely link that in the notes.
But the thing I'll say is like that's like a very Web2. Like
Yeah.
I think I pitched Foundry Group when Gitcoin was raising, and they were like, you're going to teach us Web3, like if we do this deal. And I'm like, I don't know, like, like it's been done the same way for a lot. Like, I think we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater of the way venture's been done for a long time. But at the same time, like there are problems in venture that I hope Web3 can solve. And so, I think that there's a lot to learn from that capital structure. And, lots of Web2 innovation has been had through venture deals. And so I think that might be something to look at as we design better accelerators for Ethereum.
Even the ICO model is something that was like IPOs, but on chain. Like it's still like pattern matching, but it was, a lot of people raise a lot of money.
The weird thing, so ICOs stand for initial coin offering, which is a play on initial public offering. It's a strange inversion of like basically incentives, where basically if you have an IPO, then you've likely spent 10 years building your venture into a profitable thing that public market retail investors will want to use. And ICOs are weird because before you even build anything, you just have a white paper, you do an ICO, and at least in 2017 you could raise $1 billion that way. And so a lot of the ventures that did ICOs in 2017, I don't think they ever went anywhere, because once you have $1 billion from your ICO, like it's really hard to turn that into market traction. And so what I think a better model would be some sort of, I really like what QAC is doing and what Griff Green is doing, where basically like you start a venture and you build it and then you basically raise money in like a quadratic funding type experience, in which people can get a piece of the cap table as you demonstrate traction. And then there's a bonding curve that pushes the token price up for everyone as you demonstrate more traction and get more revenue, more people buy your tokens. And then like you eventually get to a place where the team's lockup is over, and then the team can cash out after they've created a venture that's profitable. That feels like a much better structure for 2025. So like you should have Griff on the show and ask him about QAC, because I think that like structures like that are probably the future.
QAC? I will.
QAC, quack.
Looks like quack.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another great.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Oh, I was going to say another great structure you could look into is Revnets by Django. He's the founder of Juicebox, and they basically got a structure where basically you issue your initial token on a bonding curve, but then you put the revenue from your venture into the bonding curve as buy pressure that buys back the token. And so if you have a new venture that's spinning off revenue, provably number will go up in the token because the buy pressure is creating a floor for the token price. And so I think that like structures like that really align incentives between the founding team and the initial investors. And hopefully in a year or two, it'll be really clear to new builders that they can just put their ventures into QAC, into Revnet, and get their venture off the ground and get financial capital as they demonstrate traction. And stuff like that is going to be super cool when it eventually comes to market.
Hell yeah. I have a ton of questions, but we don't have time. I'm just going to skip ahead to let's get off the tangent of the accelerator for now. Hopefully we see an Ethereum accelerator, many Ethereum accelerators emerge.
Many good ones.
But yes. Let's talk about AI. Like AI is so powerful right now, and I use it for freaking everything. What is your day-to-day AI usage look like? What are you using it for?
Yeah, let's open up ChatGPT and see what I've been asking.
Look at the history.
ChatGPT, give me a compliment.
So lots of ChatGPT is one thing that you're using. There's lots of like bouncing things off chat.
Yeah, I mean, I use ChatGPT, I use Claude, I use Gemini. I've been using Cursor to vibe code things. I barely code anything anymore. I just like vibe code almost everything that I do. Let's see, my most recent queries are I ChatGPT'd what is product market fit, because I knew I was coming on the PMFers podcast. I've been asking ChatGPT a lot about Ethereum localism, which is a new movement that I've been trying to stimulate, where basically we use Ethereum like tools to fund public goods and the arts locally. So I've been using it as sort of like an idea buddy on that.
Which will hallucinate that your idea is good every time. Like don't count on it to tell you have a bad idea unless it's like really bad.
I mean, I think it depends on the prompt and whether you're looking for confirmation bias or whether you're looking for actual good feedback. I've been messing around with, how so ChatGPT just released a new feature where it can remember everything around you, and it knows all of your prompting history. So I've been giving it prompts like psychoanalyze me, or like say you're the CIA and you wanted to manipulate me with everything you know. Like what are my threat vectors? I've been fucking around with those kind of queries. Yeah. And it turns out I'm driven by networked belonging, and I walk the line between optimism and apocalypse. So like those are the kind of insights that you can get out of this.
And you have found a good network and belonging, right? At the Regen hub and folks around you. It seems like you do have a good belonging right now.
Yeah, so I split my time between Boulder and New York, and I think that like in local areas like that, I have a good network of people who think like me. And I've been trying to do community organizing of meetups where people can get together and share ideas and break bread. And I've met so many good people by just giving to the community, giving first, and then receiving back from that. And I think that might have been how you and I met back in the day. Is like we're both like we're Colorado-based builders back in 2017, or maybe I discovered you on Twitter. I'm not sure.
I think I was an early follower of Techstars, and there was a guy in Boulder, Andrew Hyde, I think, and I was following him, and then I kind of was following that a long time before, but then I started getting to Ethereum and discovered you, and I don't know. Yeah. I probably was in your DMs a lot, bugging you about things.
Andrew is he's like the He's like the Yoda to my Obi-Wan. Like I learned everything about community
Hell yeah.
organizing through Andrew Hyde, and it's just so sad that we lost him to Solana. He works in
Is
the
that
Solana
true? I didn't know that. He
system.
works for Solana?
Yeah, him and I, when we catch up, we're like, I'll be like, hey, when are you joining Ethereum? And he's like, when are you joining Solana? Let me just do that in an infinite loop while we shit
That's
post
fun.
for a while. But yeah, he's a great guy, and I think that one of the things that I'm really excited about Ethereum localism is that there's just so much positive stuff that happens locally when you really like give first into a community and feel like you have that belonging, and then you can build lots of positive sum things on top of that. And so yeah, the local community in NYC and in Boulder is really fun to hang out with.
All right, couple more questions here. What things actually need a blockchain? What do you think about that?
Oh,
Like when you're thinking of product
isn't that
market
the
fit.
$1 billion question?
Yeah, well, maybe. Yeah.
I think that it's really I mean, I think that I actually tweeted this morning, which real world groups have burning problems Ethereum is uniquely suited to solve. So maybe I'll rattle off a couple answers that came into my responses from there. People said land access and land titles are super fucked in certain parts of the world. Having a blockchain fixes this. Displaced peoples and populations like refugees don't have access to the financial system or income. Supply chains, people have been working with that for a while. Someone responded cults and co-ops and occupy people, basically everyone who's already trying to opt out of the traditional financial system. Elections, sex workers, someone said tax evaders. Ooh, I don't know if we want to be building for them. IP ownership and registration. Oh, stablecoins and remittances, I think is a huge one. Yep. So yeah, maybe we'll put a link to that tweet in the show notes, and builders can check out that and see if there's anything that they want to build there.
Josh Stark recently linked to an old Virgil Griffith post. It was like 2018, and Virgil Griffith is talking about kinds of things on blockchain, and this reminded me of that. And he says, go look at any coordination problem in the world and then apply some kind of staking mechanism or some kind of on-chain mechanism to try to like fix that coordination problem. That's maybe another angle to take at this.
Yeah, Virgil Griffith wrote this post called Ethereum is a game-changing technology, literally. And for me, that was a huge canonical piece for actually that's the reason I wrote the Green Pill book, which is a book I wrote about how crypto can regenerate the world and create more positive sum games. So the progenation of that idea for me was like what led to all this like positive sum hippy dippy stuff, regenerative capitalist stuff that happened in the future. I'm not a communist. Don't believe in me. And it's not true. I'm a capitalist. But like the hippy dippy stuff, like it all has its roots in Virgil Griffith and in the work that he's done. So hats off to Virgil. I can't wait to have you back in the community.
Yes. I think he has your hair now too.
Yeah. You gotta have long hair if you live in Colorado. It's mandatory. Okay.
Before I ask my last question, you want to show Alo Capital? What are you working on these days? What's the hot new?
Yeah. So, capital allocation is basically anytime we spend money on anything, what we're trying to accomplish. I think that blockchains are going to change how we allocate capital in a major way, just like how the internet changed how information routes in society, because we could then send information packets across a computer network. I think that because we can now send value packets across blockchains, it's going to completely rewrite the way that we allocate capital. And we are studying the design space and building a venture studio that builds the next quadratic funding, next retro funding, next commitment pooling, next networked way of doing on-chain capital allocation. So one way of thinking about what we're doing is that, I'm known as the founder of Gitcoin and for inventing Gitcoin. I think we want to create the next dozen Gitcoins, basically like the next ways that we allocate capital. And I think that there's a really huge design space that could be really good for humanity and really good for communities and networks of people. We can build more effective, democratic, transparent, incorruptible capital allocation than ever before with on-chain primitives. And so we're just studying that design space, and the venture is called Alo Capital because we're studying capital allocation. And just in the sort of primordial soup of defining our offering and figuring out what the product is going to be. But by Dev Connect this year in November, I'm hopeful that we'll have actually like a core product that we can launch to the world. So at that point, invite me back and ask me how we achieve PMF for Alo
Let's
Capital.
go. Sounds great. I'll see you in November. That sounds awesome. Okay, last goofy question. Thank you for being here, Owocki. What is your superpower?
What is my superpower? I think for me, a superpower is community, just like curating a group of people and bringing them together in a space and earnestly exploring a design space or a problem set in a way that is positive sum and creates value for all. And I think that it's not a superpower for me, but it's like the superpower is unlocked when we're channeling all of the goodness of all of us working together towards a shared goal. And so I think it's the friends and relationships and community that we've built along the way. And the stuff I talk about with Green Pill and community building, like I think it's just like being earnest and like showing up and being present with people and breaking bread. And like sometimes you fuck it up, and like we're all like autistic, like awkward people, and so sometimes it goes a little bit haywire. But for me, a superpower of this space is community and shared purpose.
And I think you're a good community builder and a good kind of beacon in a community. I know that like when you talk at something like ETH Denver, I see people all around stopping to listen to you, and I think it's just something you're good at.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's because they're trying to get away from the Binance and
Oh no, here
ICP
it
sponsorships
comes.
and I think ETH Denver has gotten too big and too corporate, and they're like literally their business model is selling sponsorships to ETH killers for ETH Denver. So I think people are looking for that bottoms up, like organic, what ETH Denver used to be back in the day. But yeah, thank you for saying that, and I think that we'll try to create like bottom up community spaces, and I'm really excited to see what 2026 looks like.
Hell yeah. Thanks,
Before
Owocki. Thanks for being
before
here.
ETH Denver, let's do it.
ETH Denver Classic. Gitcoin, Green Pill, Moonshot Bots. Mr. Owocki has lots of product market fit, and you can too. Go learn. I'll put some books and references in the show notes so y'all can check them out. But thank you, Owocki, for being here. We'll see you at the next one.
See you later, PMFer.